Ukraine attacks a Russian hydropower command hub, and in less than 90 seconds, an entire battlefield goes dark.
At 3:42 a.m., two silent strikes cut through the fog at nearly 900 kilometers per hour. A flash tears across the dam gate. The shockwave slams into concrete with the force of hundreds of tons of pressure. Then the river explodes outward. More than 8 million gallons of water per second surge through the breach. Power grids collapse. Command links vanish. A control center worth over $120 million disappears under mud and steel. And here's the question for you. Was this just another precision strike? Or the exact moment modern warfare crossed a new line? Because what you're about to witness is not chaos. It is a calculated chain reaction where deception becomes the deadliest weapon on the battlefield. Stay with me to the end and tell me this. If you were the one flying into that darkness, would you have taken the shot? 3:31 a.m. The valley sleeps under a ceiling of low fog, visibility reduced to barely 1.1 kilometers. The river below reflects no moonlight. The hills stand frozen. Even the wind seems to be holding its breath. Then, at just 135 feet above the ridgeline, a MiG-29 cuts through the darkness. The jet is more than 38 years old. Its engines roar like a forgotten machine from another era. Its cockpit glows with soft amber warnings. Tonight, this aircraft carries unfamiliar weight, technology never designed for its wings. Inside the cockpit, the temperature reads -7 degrees Celsius. Fuel reserves are tight. Oxygen pressure is stable. The pilot's hands are calm, but his breathing is slow and deliberate. Every second now carries consequence. This mission began 41 days earlier as a theoretical model on a dim planning screen. Tonight, theory becomes altitude, speed, and survival. 70 kilometers ahead, a massive Russian hydropower command complex feeds electricity into multiple frontline sectors. Its defense is anchored by layered air defense doctrine, built around one assumption, that no attack reaches the target unseen. At 3:33 a.m., that assumption begins to crack. From the shadow of the reservoir, 15 small launch signatures lift silently into the fog. Not missiles, not bombers. Lightweight units with plastic frames and synthetic wings. Individually harmless. Collectively deceptive. They rise in tight spacing, adjusting altitude in synchronized micro-movements. Each unit carries a reflected radar footprint far larger than its true body. On Russian scopes, the first returns appear. To the defense network, it does not look like reconnaissance. It looks like the opening note of a full aerial assault. Far behind the hills, the MiG pilot watches the signals bloom across his data link. He does not change course. He does not increase throttle, because the strike has not yet reached the airspace. It has reached the enemy's expectations. 3:36 a.m. On the far side of the reservoir, the first wave crosses an invisible line. At a speed just under 420 kilometers per hour, the decoy formation pushes through layered airspace from the northeast. Their altitude shifts constantly, from 280 feet up to 1,400 feet, never settling long enough for a clean tracking solution. On Russian radar, the swarm now stretches over a width of nearly 9 kilometers. To any operator watching the screen, this is no probe. This looks like commitment. Inside the command vehicle, automated threat algorithms begin flashing priority classifications: high speed, multi-axis approach, dense spacing. The system interprets the returns as manned strike aircraft. The human operators see what the software confirms. The first interception authorization is issued within 7.4 seconds. Then the response explodes into motion. Twin autocannons rotate into position. Radar lock tightens. A missile tears from its rail at nearly Mach 3, climbing instantly into the fog. Moments later, a flash blooms high above the trees. One decoy vanishes from the screen. But the formation does not retreat, instead it fractures. 16 remaining contacts scatter outward, executing violent lateral shifts at 9 G-equivalent turn rates. To the tracking system, the sky suddenly becomes chaos. Target vectors multiply. Velocity profiles contradict one another. The algorithm hunts for structure and finds none. The air defense battery is now firing blind, reacting to behavior, not intention. Far to the south, the MiG pilot watches each detonation arrive as silent pulses across his data feed. Every missile that rises toward the decoys is one less threat reserved for him. Now let me ask you something. If you were sitting in that command vehicle with 18 hostile contacts appearing on your scope at once, would you assume deception or invasion? Because in the next few seconds, that decision will decide whether the real strike ever gets off the ground. And just as the defense network commits fully to the false sky ahead of them, something begins to move quietly from the opposite direction, behind the hills, below the radar horizon, and straight into the blind side of the battlefield. 0341 a.m. While the false battle still rages to the northeast, the real predator finally breaks cover. From the southern ridge, the MiG-29 surges forward at 610 kilometers per hour, still hugging the terrain at less than 160 feet. The jet remains invisible to most long-range radar, hidden inside the warped geometry of the hills. Its engines do not scream. They whisper power through controlled thrust. Inside the cockpit, every system is alive. Altitude ticks 1,700 feet. The climb is deliberate, timed to the second. The pilot waits for the exact moment when the defense network is no longer thinking in north or south, only in chaos. At 2.8 kilometers from the release point, the MiG pulls sharply into a near-vertical climb. Twin afterburners ignite. The aircraft leaps skyward in a violent burst of acceleration, converting speed into altitude with brutal precision. The radar shadow collapses behind it. Inside the Russian command zone, a new contact appears. Massive, fast, climbing. The warning tone arrives late. By 3:41, the MiG reaches 3,900 feet and holds its nose at a steep angle for just over 2.5 seconds longer than safety doctrine would ever allow. Every alert inside the cockpit screams for evasive action. The pilot ignores them. Then the release. Two wing-guided munitions separate cleanly from the pylons. Their glide fins deploy instantly. They do not dive. They drift forward into the dark with silent intent. At the same moment, the last available interceptor missile rises from the defense battery at nearly Mach 3, chasing the heat of the MiG's afterburners. The aircraft snaps into an extreme brake turn, shedding altitude in a violent arc. Defensive countermeasures bloom behind it. The missile passes close enough to shake the airframe savage, fragments ripping across the trailing edge. The engines keep spinning. The jet disappears back into the valley. Above the battlefield, the guided munitions continue their glide. For the defense network, the sky appears empty again. But the attack has already passed the point of no return. 0342 a.m. The valley falls unnaturally quiet. High above the dark reservoir, the two guided munitions descend in near silence at roughly 0.78 Mach, adjusting their glide with microscopic corrections. No heat trail, no engine signature, only motion. At 910 meters from impact, their targeting systems refine the final solution. The aim point is not the main dam wall. It is a reinforced control segment barely 12 inches thick, a patch installed during emergency repairs weeks earlier. The first strike lands dead center. The detonation fractures the steel face in less than 0.04 seconds, converting a rigid barrier into dust and vapor. The second impact follows 1.6 seconds later, driving the destruction deeper into the structural core. Concrete anchors tear free. Support ribs lose integrity in a chain reaction. Then the physics arrives. Behind the shattered gate, more than 8.7 million gallons of suspended water per second suddenly finds release. It does not seep. It catastrophically discharges. A pressure wave exceeding 48 psi slams into the spillway with unstoppable force. The earth embankment dissolves. A breach opens from 9 feet wide to over 54 feet in under 11 seconds. Mud, rock, steel, and broken infrastructure surge outward in a moving wall of destruction. 400 yards downstream, the Hydropower Command Complex detects the pressure surge too late. Emergency bulkhead protocols trigger, but only partially. A torrent nearly 17 feet high smashes into the reinforced access level. Exterior vehicles are overturned instantly. Generators submerge. Internal lighting collapses into darkness. Tactical servers fall offline in rapid succession. Within 1 minute, the sector's energy control, data relay, and battlefield coordination functions disappear beneath swirling floodwater. Across the wider zone, secondary effects strike almost immediately. Power transmission drops across a 32-kilometer corridor. Rail ballast collapses in multiple sections. A primary resupply route vanishes beneath saturated ground. The dam has not merely failed, it has rewritten the operational map. 0344 a.m. Downstream, the flood front expands faster than any emergency model predicted. What began as a breach at the dam now becomes a moving system of collapse. The water mass accelerates across the low basin at over 58 kilometers per hour, carrying debris fields that stretch nearly 700 meters behind the leading edge. Concrete fragments, steel frames, shattered vehicles, everything becomes momentum. On the Western Access Road, a mechanized convoy attempts to reverse course. The first vehicle clears the bend. The second does not. Within 14 seconds, the roadway surface fails beneath the weight of rushing saturation. 2 armored carriers lose traction and tilt sideways into the surge. Communications vanish sector by sector. Fiber relay stations fail across a 29-kilometer span. Mobile towers drop from the network grid one after another. Backup power systems activate automatically, then shut down under water pressure within 90 seconds. Inside the command layers, confusion spreads mechanically. Data feeds freeze mid-refresh. Target tracks decay into false echoes. Coordination algorithms lose synchronization across 3 separate battalion zones. By the time fallback routing protocols engage, more than 60% of real-time battlefield visibility is already lost. In the logistics corridor, the effects become immediate and irreversible. A primary railway support line buckles across a flooded depression nearly 6 meters deep, suspending loaded supply cars in unstable suspension. Fuel tankers grounded on higher pavement are stranded without forward clearance. Ammunition transport is halted across the entire axis. Along the defensive perimeter, generator stations fall silent in sequence. Radar towers revert to offline state. Thermal sensors lose contrast under heavy moisture saturation. Air defense units transition from integrated network mode to isolated local tracking. The battlefield does not go dark, it goes blind. Within 8 minutes of the initial breach, the region shifts from coordinated defense posture to fragmented, localized survival. No single explosion causes this, no single strike. It is the accumulated physics of failure. Energy redirected into flood. Flood redirected into blindness. Blindness redirected into vulnerability. And the chain is no longer reversible. 0352 a.m. The water continues to move long after the sky has gone silent. Across the flooded basin, emergency lights flicker in broken patterns, reflecting off muddy currents that now cover more than 4.6 square kilometers of what had been fortified terrain. Vehicles remain stranded at odd angles. Some are half submerged. Others sit motionless on isolated patches of broken road. At the center of the collapse, the former Hydropower command zone no longer functions as a command zone at all. Internal compartments are fully submerged under nearly 2.7 meters of water. Backup generators fail from sustained saturation. Protective server vaults lose pressure integrity. Data links that once coordinated multiple formations cease transmitting within 11 minutes of the breach. Upstream, the dam spillway continues to discharge uncontrollably at an estimated 7.9 million gallons per second, carving deeper into the weakened embankment and widening the breach beyond repair threshold. Engineering teams will later calculate that structural recovery will require no less than 210 days of uninterrupted reconstruction, if access even becomes possible. Along the broader front, the consequences propagate outward. Over 5,400 personnel across several defensive sectors transition into limited visibility operations. Precision-guided coordination reverts to voice relay. Air defense coverage collapses into local bubbles of isolated tracking. Long-range resupply is disrupted across a corridor exceeding 31 kilometers. None of this is caused by a massive barrage. None of it begins with overwhelming firepower. It begins with a sequence of misdirected reactions, misplaced confidence, and a defense structure trained to defeat force, but not deception. By the time dawn breaks at 5:11 a.m., the battlefield appears quiet again. But the operational balance has already shifted. What vanished in the flood is not only infrastructure. It is time. It is continuity. It is the assumption that size alone guarantees control. And in modern conflict, once that assumption dissolves, the collapse rarely stops at the waterline. By sunrise, the valley looks calm again. The river slows, the smoke thins, the radar screens return to quiet static, but nothing underneath that surface is the same anymore. A single night has rewritten an entire operational sector, not with overwhelming force, but with timing, deception, and patience. What collapsed here was not only steel and concrete. What truly failed was certainty. One aircraft, a handful of low-cost drones, a chain reaction no defense model fully predicted. And now the question returns to you. If you were in that cockpit, counting down the final seconds with everything on the line, would you have held the climb or broken early to survive? Tell me what you would have done in that moment. And if this story revealed something new about modern warfare, don't forget to share it with someone who still believes size always wins. Because tonight proved sometimes the smallest moves redraw the biggest maps.